So Kim, what's on your radar?
Well, you may have heard that tucked inside of the reconciliation package is a proposed measure that would require banks to report to the IRS any transactions of $600 or more. Now, I want to start off by saying it's a little unclear in reading the language whether or not it's individual transactions of $600 or more, or if it's an aggregate of all annual bank transactions with a gross total over $600. But either way, nearly everyone is included in either scenario. So Democrats claim that they're targeting the wealthy and they want to tax the rich. They say billionaires are not paying their fair share and they want to ensure they finally do. Currently, federal law requires people, not banks, to report to the IRS any transaction of $10,000 or more. But this new proposed measure would be more invasive, as it calls for our banks to do the reporting, not ourselves individually, and will subject nearly everyone to scrutiny and to the threats of audits. Essentially, we'd all be treated like tax evading criminals until we prove ourselves otherwise. Democrats continue to assert they're going after the ultra rich. But if that's the case, why such a low threshold of $600? An amount practically every American exceeds by simply paying their rent or mortgage. People are now up in arms accusing the Democrats of not actually targeting the rich, but instead targeting everyday Americans. When Nancy Pelosi was pressed on whether or not this proposal would remain in the reconciliation package, she said, yes, 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 yes.
So Americans are starting to be worried about this. Do you think that this pay for of giving the IRS more money to crack down on unpaid taxes is going to stay in the reconciliation bill?
Yes.
And what do you say
Yes.
to Americans
Yes.
who are concerned
Yes.
about that?
Yes. Well, I mean, with all due respect, the plural of anecdote is not data. I've said that before here. Yes, there are concerns that some people have, but if people are breaking the law and not paying their taxes, one way to track them is through the banking measure.
Well, many Americans are rightly worried about this measure. The IRS is one of the most feared federal agencies in the country, and giving these bureaucrats access to all of our bank account transactions totaling $600 feels like government overreach in the least and spying at its worst. People are certainly worried about giving the IRS, an agency with a history of weaponizing its abilities, this much supercharged power. But Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen says the proposed measure is mischaracterized.
You want banks to report transactions of $600 or more. That's what the IRS wants. Does this mean that the government is trying to peek into our pocketbooks if you want to look at $600 transactions?
Absolutely not. I think this proposal has been seriously mischaracterized. The proposal involves no reporting of individual transactions of any individual.
So let's go ahead and break down what Janet Yellen is saying here, and you can watch that entire clip online. But she claims that the IRS is attempting to crack down on the opaque sources of income of billionaires, that average people receive a paycheck that is accurately reported with a W-2, and it's the unreported income that they're worried about. But the recent publication of the Pandora Papers shows us the ways billionaires are able to hide their wealth, and that's through playing elaborate shell games. They use tax havens and trusts and shift funds between global jurisdictions. Everything they do is legal. The disparity between the rich and the poor is the fact that they're wealthy and have access to what is dubbed the wealth defense industry, an army of tax attorneys, accountants, and wealth managers to help them legally evade the same level of taxation of the middle class. So who are they really targeting by requiring a reporting threshold of only $600? The answer seems pretty obvious to me. They're not going after the rich. They're targeting the little people, the under-the-table wage earners, contractors, small business owners, and pretty much anyone in the service industry and gig economy. You got a side hustle? Do they pay you in cash? Do you earn tips? Were you one of the thousands of personal care workers who figured out you could make money through some home visits when the salons were shuttered during the pandemic lockdowns? Have you kept some of those side clients going? Are you one of the millions who quit your job and started working for yourself in some way as a contractor? Are you one of the thousands of teachers with a low salary and a cash-paying side job to keep yourself afloat? Well, the gig economy has been growing for quite some time, but the pandemic perhaps made it accelerate faster. And now the IRS wants their cut. Any deposit or withdrawals that are $600 or more, which could be something as simple as paying rent or a mortgage or even paying off a credit card bill, and in some instances student loans, will be subject to IRS scrutiny. Essentially, they're going to find out that you made that money in your gig economy job, and they intend to tax you for it. Now, look, we're all for everyone paying their fair share. No one's advocating for evading taxes. But the Democrats say they're going after the rich, yet their actions show us they're actually going after not even the white-collar middle class. Most of them are salaried with automatic taxation coming out of each paycheck. But instead, their actions show us they seem to be targeting the blue-collar gig economy workers, the very people they claim to be helping, but also the very people who are not big donors to their campaign coffers. Nope, that's the ultramillionaire and billionaire class who aren't targeted by this. Now, I get it. Fixing all the loopholes the wealthy are taking advantage of is complicated and difficult, especially when they're donating large amounts of money to your campaigns to get you to not do it. It's a lot easier to gaslight the little guy into believing you're going after the wealthy, even though they won't be affected by this at all. On top of all of this, they're going to be giving the IRS $80 billion over the next 10 years to do it, rather than invest that money in the very people they intend to go after. The people barely making ends meet, the people who need side hustles in the first place to pay for their skyrocketing rents and rising inflation costs. Now, there are many excellent proposals inside of the reconciliation package that will help working people and middle-class families in America. Ryan has done an excellent job over the past several weeks of spelling out the numerous benefits we could expect to see if it passes. Expansion of Medicare, universal pre-K, 2 years of free community college, and an extended child tax credit, just to name a few. But there's a looming question of how we're going to pay for it. We keep hearing they're going to tax the rich, and the revenue generated from them finally doling out what they always should have been paying all along will help offset the costs. But it actually looks like a lot of the money will be coming from the very same people the money is intended to help. Essentially, the wealth distribution won't be from the rich to the poor, but from the poor back to the poor. So I want to point out that Democrats are kind of at odds about this $600 threshold. Some of them are wanting to push it up to about $10,000. But again, in reading the very specific language in the proposal, it was unclear to me, and it was even unclear to those in various different banking associations, whether or not this would be individual transactions that are over whatever the threshold ends up being, or if it's the total aggregate of all transactions in your bank account. So whether that be $600 or $10,000, that's nearly everybody if you're looking at the gross aggregate throughout the entire year going through your bank account. So we still don't know what that threshold is going to be. But, one thing that really stands out to me on this is that, the Biden administration has been saying that they will not raise taxes on anyone who makes under $400,000. But, and this holds true to that. They're still not raising taxes on the working class. They're just going to ensure that they find out where all of your gig economy sources of income are coming from. They're going to make sure you pay taxes on that. Seems to be a workaround.
Yeah. It's a huge problem. I mean, it sounds like a way to give them an excuse to audit people who are not trying not to pay their taxes, but maybe forgot about some payment that they didn't make, that they didn't report, and they're going to get in trouble for that. We know, for instance, right, that the IRS tends to go after smaller people because it's easier to go after them than it is to go at just for the reasons you described, because the wealthy and the powerful have good attorneys and they know how to game these things a lot better.
And they're claiming that audit rates for people making under $400,000 will not increase as a result of this. Like, that's one of the claims that's going along with this.
A dubious claim.
Well, we'll see about that. I mean, if they can invest more money in IRS auditors, and if they can sick them on the rich, and they can extract money there, then they don't need to increase on people making less than $400,000. I think this is a tricky question, because you have they estimate that it will recoup to the government something like $500 billion over 10 years. Like, that's a ton of money, and so then you're asking the question, well, if it could raise $500 billion, that's a lot of cheating that's going on. So yes, you're not raising taxes on people, but people will be paying more taxes. But should they? I mean, shouldn't if you owe those taxes and you're just straight up not paying them?
Some people aren't paying because it's confusing. They don't know what they're supposed to pay. What counts as what, etc. I mean, libertarian here. I want to defund the tax police,
yeah,
so I am as outraged as their auditing of the little guy as they are as auditing of the big guy. But
we have to remember. A lot of these people, I don't think that they're trying to evade the IRS, but I just think a lot of these gig economy workers and low wage workers, they can't afford to pay their I'm not making an excuse about not paying your taxes, I suppose, but at the same time, A lot of them cannot afford it. I mean, we have rising costs of rent, rising inflation. I mean, the cost of corn and wheat alone are up a ton of percentage even just today. So, you know, people are unable to make ends meet. They're living paycheck to paycheck. They're barely holding on to the last dollar they've got. And the last thing they're going to do is hand it over to the government. And so for this, you know, they won't need to audit. They won't need to spend money on auditors if they're making the banks do it. The banks are going to have to absorb the costs of reporting everyone's bank accounts to the IRS. So they almost eliminate the need for auditing when you're already being audited by your bank. Yeah,
and to me, the gig workers who are struggling to make ends meet shouldn't be hit with taxes at all. That's not how you're going to fund a society. This is aimed at business owners, you know, who do a lot of business off the books, and the IRS is trying to say, wait a minute, oh, you said this business made $20,000 in 2020, yet you know you pumped $1.5 million into your bank account. Something doesn't add up here. And so they're trying to like get enough data so that they can then pluck those out and say, all right, that's who we need to audit.
I got Ryan to say we need to get rid of some taxes. Okay, let's wrap. Let's end this. Cut it there.
Absolutely. No, totally. Yes.
We'll have more Rising right after this.